Fortnite has changed the map size, but also has changed the number of players in every single game. So I want to do a little breakdown here. Now, this is an actual game. Shout out to Assyrian, by the way. This entire thing, all of this I'm going to do is basically on Assyrian, not actually in-game. So all the stuff you can look at on there, not sponsored, but they are awesome. Their website is fantastic. One of the things I want to look at, actually, honestly, there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of very interesting different analysis you can have from this. So firstly, there's 80 players in comparison to 100. On top of that, the map size is also way smaller. So in comparison to what it used to be, not my own one, shout out to Hollow FNBR. I don't know if they made this or tweeted it, but you can see the map is way smaller. So for reference, before here to here, so like edge to edge used to be 2,450 meters. Same here to here. This is like quite square, right? So 2,450, 2,450. Now this map from like kind of top to here is 1,100 or 120 around this age, right? So it's literally half the size top to bottom there and side to side. So it's significantly smaller, and you're cutting off 20 people, which means that you're basically having way more people per POI. So everyone's way crammed in. If you played ranked or pub so far, you'll notice that there are fights, like you finish one and you're not going to spend 10 minutes before you get to the next one. Now I'll do more comparisons in a second, but the zones themselves are very different too. So as you see, first zone pops here. If I fast forward, second zone, third zone, fourth zone. So the first 4 zones, as you've noticed here, are all just the kind of standard shrinking ones. And then zone 5 is a partial. Previously it was zone 6, which was a partial, but now 11 minutes and 40 roughly into the game. Let me write that down before I forget. 11:40 first partial. So yeah, almost just before 12 minutes into the match, you've already got your first partial, which means that there's going to be a lot more action, a lot more rotation. And then you see again, 6th zone is yet another partial here. 7th, 8th. I think and then is that a partial? So a 7th now is the first outside zone. So previously, which I'll show you in another one, this kind of first outside zone was the 8th zone. Now that's the 7th. And then you've got your first moving zone, which is the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So there's one more moving zone, and all of the partial zones have been moved one earlier. So if we look at the other map, this here is from the previous chapter, right? So the first partial zone here, which you can see is the 6th zone this time rather than the 5th zone, is at 17 minutes 27. So 17 and a half minutes in comparison to like 11 and a half. So essentially the mid game has been not really shortened by 6 minutes, but the first partial has been shortened by around 6 minutes. You also notice this game lasted 27 minutes 41, whereas this one lasted 23 minutes. So really what was the end game to? End game here started. So I consider the end game to start here, right? A lot of people say this, but I consider this one of the partial zones. So this point here, which is now the 8th zone here, this is where the end game starts, and this is basically 6 minutes. Whereas the equivalent zone here, which is the same first kind of outside moving one, is 4 minutes and 40. Maybe this game was also shorter. This game might not have gone to heal off. How far did it go? Yeah, this game didn't go as deep into as heal off, so it's not necessarily 2 minutes longer, but you could roughly say that there's 2 minutes more moving zones. The mid games are also 5 minutes shorter. So honestly, the pacing of these matches feels way quicker. You really don't have much time to like sit and do anything. There's a lot less dead time, a lot less like opportunity for surge trading. This, I must say, I absolutely love so far. I haven't played a tournament. I didn't play the eval cup, so I don't know how it feels to play yet. But just playing ranked and just watching some of the eval already, this feels. I think this is great. I think this is good. However, there's also a lot of problems with this too. I'm not going to say problems. There's just a lot of changes to the gameplay. Things to consider. The first is third parties. Because the map is so much smaller and you're cramming 80 people onto it, right? Essentially, I can't really even show you all 80 because as you notice, if you look at the top left here where there's 80 people alive, right? Look how quickly they die. It goes down to 70, but a minute in because there's so many people contested, right? So from all of these drop spots, wherever you're landing, you're basically contested. Like straight away, it's very difficult to be uncontested. In particular, this would be true in an opens format where you have like tons of people in each one. So firstly, you're going to be contested. Secondly, if you're not contested, all of these drop spots are really close to each other. So one in ranked in particular that I've been noticing is this is awful to land at, because if you land here, firstly, there's usually like 2 or 3 teams. If you're not, they have so many options to push into places all around them, right? And I'm sure there's other places around, like these guys are they already rotating out? They are not already rotating out here. No. Either way, it's like, and look how many people are in Cleus. I think this is called Cleus. All the drop stops around. Very difficult to like get additional loot because if you're contested off spawn, you'll be fighting, and if you fight for a while, the people are so close they come to third party. That's tough. If you played ranked and you go anywhere near mid map, that's kind of what I mentioned. This area here generally. If you're in this spot and you start a fight, if it's not over quickly, you're getting third party. And with the pistol this season, everyone's just sitting like third party and you're just shooting shots. So yeah, the smaller map size and more crammed people. If for a competitive, I'm not sure how that'll be. At least least I'm going to say for ranked right now, like obviously you get into fights much faster, feels way better. Although it can be a little annoying to get third partied, but that's just kind of a side effect of having, you know, more people close together. Now, on the flip side, there's also rotations that become a little bit of a problem. So there's three main spots I like to think of. I don't know 100% yet, but the first one is this tire here. So this is like an air vent. It can send you up. I think it gets you to around like this radius, something like this. I did test. It's close to Springfield. I could be wrong. For playing Storm, for example, like, you know, you see the size of the map. If you can basically rotate to like here, that's a pretty far rotate. So if you've got like a zone that pulls up to this northeast, for example, and you could maybe get to this point already, like you're relatively close to making your way in. So a lot of players are playing Storm a lot to try and like avoid that kind of stuff. Same thing up in the top right here with the reactors. I don't know the full distance. I think you go further from these. You know, we see a lot of players staying in this POI for a while, and then, you know, you can rotate around the map. Just kind of a side effect of the map being smaller and the fact that the storm damages you. Oh, what are the storm damages actually? I've just thought about that now. All right, I'm actually asking Osirian the minute for that because then I'd have to sit in a 25-minute game. But one of the things that I think is very interesting is obviously Storm Surge itself has changed too. So players alive here, first 3 zones, so well, 2, 3, and 4. The Storm Surge threshold is actually 80, so like 100% of the players being alive. Then for the 5th zone, which is the first partial, it's 70, 60, 50, 40, 40, 30, 30. So it's actually like way, I'm gonna say way less, but Storm Surge generally has changed. And for this tournament in particular, which was an Eval Cup win format first game, there actually wasn't any Storm Surge at all. So I do wonder if just because of everyone being closer and having potentially less loot, there's just less players alive, and you know, Surge generally didn't really need to be a factor. I will check other games actually to see if it was though. So yeah, just looking at the games, game number 2 also did not have any Surge. Game number 3 only had a warning in the 8th zone again. And then game number 4 had active Surge in the 8th zone. So like all of these 8th zones had warnings at least. This is the only game that actually had it active. Now obviously like in an FNCS Grand Finals, this will probably be a little bit more, you know, it'll be more stacked, let's be real, rather than just an Eval Finals. But it seems like with the smaller map, Surge just isn't as big of an issue. And I think that's great because let's be honest, Surge is boring and it's not something I want to talk about that much. Another very strange change, which Knockin from Osirian has just showed me actually, is the 10th zone and now the 11th zone, the one directly after that, are actually the same size. So this zone here doesn't shrink. It just moves, which is quite interesting. You can see that that whole transition, it doesn't actually shrink. It just moves. Anyway, strange little point. All right, did everyone's favorite thing, and I did a chart again, thanks to Osirian. They sent me a lot of the data on this so I can look at it. Now, what's really interesting here is how things have changed just based on. So what I've done is I've put like new, old, new, old, new, old, as you can see. So firstly, let's look at the times. So the new one is in seconds. That's 1,290 seconds, which is around 21.5 minutes roughly, which was 26.5 minutes. Of course, it might be a little different because this first zone here, which is like zone 0, sometimes the time for that like 6 seconds isn't, you know, you're in the bus and all that kind of stuff. Roughly, so we've lost, how much have we lost? So we've lost 290 seconds, which is 4.8 minutes. So basically 5 minutes have been cut off of the game. Where that has happened, as you can see, I've split this into shrinking partials and moving zones. So the shrinking zones have lost 350. So that's, you know, what is now 1 to 4, and it was 1 to 5 before. The partial zones, there's still 3 of those, and they're actually exactly the same. But as I said, they were just moved 1 zone earlier. So previously that was zones 6, 7, and 8. Now that's 5, 6, and 7 instead are partials. So they're just the same length, just moved 1 zone earlier. And then there's an additional moving zone, as I also mentioned there. So that starts in zone number 8, which as you can see, like they're offset by 1 here, right? With like these, this is the zone radius, the zone size. So what's strange is that 10th and 11th zone is the same size. So it's like they've just added this moving zone here, it would seem like, just to like slap another one in, which is pretty cool. Another thing I did here was, this is just from one game, so very much so take this with a grain of salt because a lot of RNG depends on a single game, but I'm not going to go through a bunch of games to try and compare. These are the players that were alive in the new eval in comparison to just the first game from the most recent one before that. And as you can see, right, like player numbers die out pretty quick, but again here there's like not much happens here between the 3rd and 7th zone. So that's kind of again getting into like those partials. That's your kind of boring mid game as in the new zones. And in the old ones, that was, you know, you were kind of having like a slow drip down. But as we already mentioned, like Surge doesn't really activate. Like here's the Surge thresholds. You're like way below on all of them. This is why, you know, what was it, 8th where we were seeing warnings? Yeah, so like this zone here is really the only one where that actually ends up happening on. So games do seem like a lot more active. There seems like there's a lot less need for Storm Surge. And now moving zones are also unbelievably stacked, right? Because you've got to think, this 8th is the first moving zones, and there's 49 players alive in comparison to like the 35 of previous. So these new zones are way more focused on actual end games and the early games, and they've basically cut out like 350 seconds of just boring zone shrinking. everything else is just about getting some loot and just moving. Now, I think these are great. I think if they only basically added a little bit more loot to the map, because like one of the biggest issues I keep finding is that there just doesn't feel like there's that much loot. Like it looks like it. I've not done a full comparison to see exactly what. Like if you have to reboot in your edge zone because of the shorter zones, it's pretty tough. I feel like if you're contested, because you're so contested, because you're always fighting, everyone's so much closer, really tough to make sure you actually have enough loot generally to play out the rest of the game. So uncontested teams are definitely a big advantage. Either way, I actually think all these changes are really, really sick. I'm very excited to see how they play out for the whole season because again, one tournament's happened so far. Very early days. Let me know what you think. To be honest, if you've not played a tournament yet, you probably won't know any difference. I just think cutting through the boring mid games and cutting that stuff out is super important. Like the video, use code RESUB, subscribe. Have a good one. Peace.